Squeaky's big dream. Squeaky, a squirrel no bigger than a plump pine cone, sprawled listlessly across an oak branch, his tiny chest puffing with unfulfilled desire. High above, a robin executed airy arabesques against the cerulean canvas, its lilting melody a taunt to Squeaky's terrestrial plight. He watched, mesmerized, nose twitching, whiskers vibrating with an irrepressible longing. Forget nuts. Today held no allure for acorns. Berries? Grubs? Unthinkable. Every sinew in Squeaky screamed for flight. Attempts, of course, had been legion, each a testament to his persistent, if somewhat delusional, optimism. Tiny paws flailed with hummingbird fervor, tragically unsuited for soaring. There'd even been meticulously crafted leaf wings, glued with tenacious tree sap, a venture best left forgotten. But today, observation morphed into concentrated study. He tracked the robin's every aerial maneuver, registering wing angles, tail as rudder proficiency, the almost imperceptible body tilt to catch invisible currents. In his mind, he was already airborne, a miniature, furry pilot, wind singing a joyful tune through his whiskers. He edged further onto the branch, tiny paws testing its yield. A soft creak, a timbered warning. The forest floor yawned far, far below. He squinted, gauging the daunting gulf. Fear, a cold pebble lodged in his belly, threatened to extinguish his resolve. But then a sign, a potent gust of wind, whipping fallen foliage into a whirling dervish. This was his chance, a celestial endorsement. He squeezed his eyes shut, picturing himself aloft, gliding through cottony clouds. A deep breath, lungs swelling with the bracing scent of pine. He commanded his limbs to obey, to ignore the ingrained instinct screaming for self-preservation. Then, with a surge of courage and a mighty spring, he hurled himself into the abyss. For an ecstatic, fleeting heartbeat he felt, almost buoyant. The wind shrieked past his ears, and delusion painted him as a true flyer, defying gravity. Reality, however, soon crashed the party. He plummeted, arms windmills, legs churning, futile. He was going down, a furry, brown projectile, bracing for the inevitable, eyes squeezed shut. A terrified squeak escaped him. He landed with an ignominious thud, the impact expelling the air from his lungs. Momentarily stunned, surrounded by swirling dust and rotting leaves, he registered a throbbing head and a disconcertingly numb tail. Above, the sound that followed was devastating. Laughter, not the playful chatter of his kind, but loud, unrestrained guffaws echoing through the canopy. He opened his eyes to find Nutsy, Hazel, and grumpy old Barnaby, perched nearby, their sides aching with amusement. "Look at Squeaky," Nutsy shrieked, dabbing at his eye. He thought he could fly. Even gentle Hazel couldn't suppress a giggle. He looked like a furry nut dropping out of the sky. Barnaby, usually a creature of stone, emitted a wheezing chuckle. "Funniest thing I've seen all season." Shame burned in Squeaky's cheeks. He scrambled upright, ignoring the pulsing ache and the throbbing tail. He longed for oblivion, for the earth to swallow him whole. "It's not funny," he squeaked, voice trembling with humiliation. "I almost made it." The laughter redoubled. "Almost what, Squeaky?" Nutsy mocked. "Almost broke your neck." Squeaky drooped, ears flattened. They simply didn't understand. They were content with their routines, with their predictable lives of nuts and berries. They couldn't grasp his burning desire for escape, to survey the world from a different angle. He turned and fled, his heart a leaden weight. He didn't seek solace in his nest. Instead, he burrowed beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient oak, a sanctuary for solitary contemplation. There, he sat, watching the birds dance through the boughs. The robin, heedless of his despair, continued its jubilant aria. They were right, in a sense. Squirrels belonged to the earth, to the trees, to the bounty of the forest floor. Yet, something deep within him rebelled against that confinement. He couldn't dismiss the sense that life held more than just earthly routines. A hawk wheeled in majestic circles overhead, keen eyes dissecting the terrain. He knew he couldn't emulate that power, that grace. But perhaps, just perhaps, he could discover his own path to flight. Perhaps wings weren't the sole answer. Perhaps there was an alternative, something unconsidered. He gazed at the sky. A faint spark of hope rekindled in his eyes. The setting sun painted the clouds with strokes of fiery orange and regal purple. It was a breathtaking panorama, a sight that evoked a poignant longing. He couldn't surrender. He wouldn't. He would persist, learn, dream. One day, he would find his way to take to the air. One day, he would prove them all wrong. And maybe, just maybe, they would finally understand. A wise encounter. Dust motes danced around Squeaky as he skulked at the oak's base, his tail a forlorn brush against the dirt. The other squirrels' mocking cries still stung, a painful echo of his aerial misadventure. He couldn't bring himself to face the upper branches, his gaze fixed instead on the knotted roots, their musky odor a meager solace. High above, concealed within the verdant foliage, luminous amber eyes kept watch. Professor Hoot, an aged owl renowned for his eccentricities and encyclopedic knowledge of the woods, had been charting Squeaky's persistent, albeit clumsy, attempts at flight. He'd witnessed the calamitous plunge, the subsequent ridicule, and now the quiet despair. Nudging his spectacles higher on his beak, he emitted a soft hoot, a sound barely piercing the susurrus of leaves. Startled, Squeaky recoiled. His tiny heart drummed a frantic rhythm as he peered into the branches. "Who is it?" he chirped, his voice trembling. Moments later, Professor Hoot glided down, landing with silent grace nearby. He was a striking figure, his plumage an intricate tapestry of browns and creams, his expression sharp and knowing. A query met with a query. "Young Squeaky," he intoned, his voice a resonant baritone. "I have something to ask you. What has roots as nobody sees is taller than trees. Up, up it goes, and yet never grows." Squeaky frowned, momentarily diverted from his shame. He knew the professor relished his enigmas. Underground stream," he ventured. The owl chuckled, a dry, rustling sound like autumn leaves skittering across the forest floor. "Warm, but no cigar. Aim higher, Squeaky. Much higher." Squeaky gnawed his lip, his brow furrowed in thought. His gaze flickered up to the oak, then back to the professor. "A mountain, indeed, a mountain. Now tell me, young Squeaky, what fuels this newfound fascination with the celestial sphere? I've observed your spirited efforts at mimicking our avian brethren." A blush crept up Squeaky's cheeks. I just want more than this," he mumbled, nudging a pebble with his foot, "to feel the caress of the wind, to witness the world from a different vantage point. I refuse to be earthbound forever." Professor Hoot scrutinized him, his head cocked inquisitively. "A commendable aspiration," he declared at last. "Yet perhaps, my young friend, you're searching amiss. Soaring isn't the only route to the heavens." Squeaky's ears perked up, intrigued. "What do you mean? Have you ever heard tell of sky seeds, Squeaky?" Squeaky shook his head. "Sky seeds? No, sir. What might those be?" Professor Hoot puffed out his chest, a spark of excitement in his golden eyes. A story for those with receptive minds and eager ears. Legend speaks of a time, eons past, when even the eldest oaks were but saplings, when the great sky spirits shed tears of yearning for the earth. These tears, upon their descent, morphed into minuscule seeds, each harboring a fragment of the sky's essence. Plant these seeds with care and cultivate them with wisdom, and they'll bestow upon you a singular connection to the heavens. Squeaky's eyes grew wide. A connection to the heavens? How so? That, my dear Squeaky, is the heart of the mystery. It said that the sky seeds don't bestow pinions, but something infinitely more profound. They awaken a sensibility within you, enabling you to perceive the world through unimagined eyes, to decipher the wind's language, to feel the very heartbeat of the stars. Professor Hoot paused, his gaze intense. "But heed this warning, Squeaky. The quest for the sky seeds is fraught with challenges. It demands patience, dedication, and a readiness to see beyond the obvious. Where do I find them? Squeaky asked, his voice brimming with anticipation. Professor Hoot smiled, a rare and beautiful expression. That, beloved Squeaky, is for you to unearth. The forest guards countless secrets, and the sky seeds reveal themselves only to those truly prepared. Begin by listening to the rustling secrets of the trees, observing the ballet of the clouds, and above all, trusting the compass within your own heart. He brushed Squeaky's fur with the gentle tip of a wing. Now I must take flight. The moon beckons, and I have riddles to ponder. With a final hoot, Professor Hoot ascended into the air, vanishing into the dense treetop. Squeaky watched him depart, his mind swirling with anticipation and a burgeoning sense of purpose. Sky seeds, an alternate path to the sky. He inhaled deeply, the earthy aroma now infused with a sweet scent of boundless possibility. He had a new journey, a fresh wellspring of hope, and a conviction, humming deep within his bushy tail, that this time he might just discover his destiny. The whispering woods beckons. The acorn, a gift from Professor Hoot, grounded Squeaky with its heft, a solid counterpoint to the shame of recent blunders. He'd spent the previous hour scrounging. Juicy berries, a cache of nuts, and a well-worn, palm-sized stone he'd always counted on for good luck. A broad leaf, lashed together with creeper, became a makeshift pack slung across his small frame. Scant provision, but all he possessed. Turning, he surveyed his den in the ancient oak, a familiar haven now abandoned. A tremor, more than just the dawn's coolness, prickled his skin. The whispering woods. The very name vibrated with unease. He inhaled deeply, the earthy tang of loam and decaying vegetation filling him. He had no choice. The sky seeds were his quarry. The jeers of the other squirrels still stung, a chorus of ridicule he yearned to silence. With a final, firm resolve, Squeaky pivoted and darted toward the boundary of the known woods, the trees looming taller and more ominous with each leap. A noticeable drop in temperature heralded his approach to the border, a sharp division between the sunlit clearing and the murky depths beyond. He paused, peering into the gloom. The whispering woods wasn't merely a title, it throbbed with sentience. A sibilant drone permeated the air, like a multitude of voices sharing secrets just beyond comprehension. He crossed the threshold. Instantly, the light waned. An arboreal roof, woven so densely, allowed only fragmented sunbeams to infiltrate, painting the forest floor in an erratic, unsettling mosaic. The trees were relics of ages, their branches contorted into fantastical shapes, swathed in moss that resembled spectral shrouds. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of wet soil, proliferating fungi, and an undercurrent. A pungent, faintly metallic tang that made his nose wrinkle. The whispering intensified, not the breeze sighing through leaves, but something deeper, more purposeful. Squeaky strained to discern a solitary voice, a single syllable, but it remained a discordant symphony of murmurs, a persistent, unnerving thrum that resonated through the earth beneath his paws. He proceeded with caution, his senses amplified. Every shadow seemed to stretch and distort. Every rustle underfoot sent a jolt of alarm through him. He spotted peculiar toadstools sprouting in clusters, their caps radiating an eerie, phosphorescent glow. Bizarre, fleshy plants with bulbous leaves bordered the trail, their surfaces slick with a viscous sheen. He hopped onto a fallen trunk, its surface treacherous with moisture. There, etched into the wood, was a sequence of spiraling glyphs, unlike any he'd encountered before. They seemed to pulse gently in the dim light, radiating a peculiar energy that caused his fur to bristle. He reached out a tentative paw, then retracted it sharply. The air around the symbols felt charged, almost abrasive. Suddenly, a twig fractured behind him. Squeaky spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw nothing but shifting shadows. "Hello?" He ventured, his voice a mere peep. The whispering sharpened, as if mocking his apprehension. He pressed onward, propelled by equal measures of fear and determination. He had to uncover the truth about the sky seeds. He had to demonstrate to himself, and to the world, that he was more than just a bumbling rodent. The further he ventured, the more bizarre the woods became. The trees seemed to incline inwards, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching to ensnare him. He passed a small opening where tangled vines formed a cage-like prison, containing a collection of bones, small bones, like those of finches or squirrels. Squeaky shuddered and hurried on, attempting to erase the image from his mind. The murmurs grew louder, more insistent. Now he could almost distinguish words, broken and fragmented, like echoes of half-remembered conversations. He thought he detected his own name, a chilling awareness that rooted him to the spot. He surveyed his surroundings, his gaze darting between the shadows. He was under observation. He could feel it. Then he saw them, a pair of eyes, burning with an unnatural luminescence, fixed on him from the depths of the undergrowth. They were large, circular, and brimming with unsettling intellect. Squeaky couldn't discern the creature to which they belonged, but he knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that it posed a threat. The eyes blinked once, languidly, deliberately. Then they dissolved into the shadows, leaving Squeaky alone in the suffocating silence of the whispering woods, the whispers swirling around him like a rising tide. Rhonda's riddle. The trees grew denser, their branches intertwining overhead like skeletal fingers. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, hung heavy in Squeaky's lungs. He pressed on, the small acorn in his paw a tangible source of comfort against the growing unease. The luminous eyes from the previous day hadn't reappeared, but the feeling of being watched lingered, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He rounded a bend in the overgrown path and stopped short. Barring his way was a massive, gnarled oak, its trunk wider than any he had ever seen. Etched into its bark was a crude, almost comical face, its features twisted into a permanent smirk. And sitting directly in front of it, a badger. This was no ordinary badger. Rhonda Riddle was larger than any badger Squeaky had encountered, her fur a patchwork of grays and browns, and her eyes, intelligent and gleaming, held a spark of amusement. She sat with regal poise, a carved wooden staff resting across her lap. Well, she boomed, her voice surprisingly melodic for such a stout creature. What have we here? A little squirrel, venturing so deep into the whispering woods. Are you lost, little one? Squeaky swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. I'm looking for the sky seeds. Rhonda chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the very ground beneath Squeaky's paws. The sky seeds, are they? And what makes you think you're worthy to seek them? I have to be, Squeaky stammered, clutching the acorn tighter. It's important. Rhonda raised a skeptical eyebrow. Importance is a subjective thing, little squirrel. Many come seeking the sky seeds, each with their own important reasons. But this path is not open to just anyone. It is guarded by knowledge, by wit. Tell me, little squirrel, are you clever? Squeaky hesitated. He wasn't known for his cleverness. Courage, perhaps, or stubbornness, but cleverness? He'd always left that to his brother. Nutsy. I can try, he squeaked. Rhonda grinned, revealing a set of surprisingly white teeth. Trying is all anyone can do. Very well, little squirrel. I am Rhonda Riddle, guardian of this path. If you wish to pass, you must answer my riddle. Fail, and you turn back. Do we have an accord? Squeaky nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had faced dangers before, physical threats he could confront with claws and teeth. But this was different. Rhonda leaned forward, her eyes twinkling. Here's my riddle. I have cities, but no houses, forests, but no trees, and water, but no fish. What am I? Squeaky's mind went blank. Cities with no houses? Forests with no trees? He stared at Rhonda, his ears twitching nervously. He thought of the whispering woods, of the strange symbols he had seen, of the luminous eyes watching him from the shadows. None of it seemed to relate to the riddle. He paced back and forth, the acorn digging into his paw. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves and Rhonda's occasional chuckle. "Can you give me a hint?" Squeaky pleaded, his voice barely a whisper. Rhonda shook her head, her grin widening. "A riddle is a test, little squirrel. Hints defeat the purpose. Think, what has the qualities I described, yet lacks the physical reality?" Squeaky closed his eyes, trying to visualize what Rhonda was describing. He imagined vast landscapes, bustling cities, and dense forests. But none of them fit. He imagined a dream, but it was too abstract. He thought of stories, but they always contained houses, trees, and fish, even if only in imagination. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Sweat beaded on Squeaky's brow. He knew he was failing. He could feel the weight of his past failures pressing down on him, the doubt creeping into his mind. He wasn't clever enough. He would never find the sky seeds. He opened his eyes and looked at Rhonda, her expression unreadable. He wanted to give up, to turn around and flee back to the familiar comfort of his den. But then he remembered why he was here, the promise he had made, the need to redeem himself. I don't know," he admitted, his voice thick with disappointment. "I can't answer it." Rhonda remained silent for a moment, studying him with those piercing eyes. Then she sighed, a puff of air that ruffled the leaves around them. "You admit defeat, then?" Squeaky hung his head. "Yes." But as the words left his mouth, something clicked in his mind. A flicker of understanding, a spark of insight. He looked up, his eyes widening. "Wait," he exclaimed. I think I know. Is it a map? A mother's wisdom?" Rhonda Riddle squinted, the sunset burnishing her lenses to amber. "So concede defeat, fledgling?" Shame pricked Squeaky's fur, a sharper sting than the phantom ache of his ill-fated leap. He conjured the taunting visages of his peers, their jeers a phantom chorus. He squeezed his eyes shut, resisting the urge to bolt. Yet the allure of the sky seeds, the dream of aerial dance, outweighed his apprehension. Inhaling deeply, he drew in the earthy aroma of loam and decaying foliage. "No," he declared, his voice a mere thread, yet resolute. "I persist." Rhonda arched a skeptical brow. "Lofty sentiments. But possess you the solution?" Squeaky's mind churned. He desperately sifted through every fragment of knowledge he possessed. The riddle danced before him, an inscrutable word salad. Cities, forests, water. What could it possibly signify? Suddenly, a tender, lilting voice resonated within him. His mother, perched beside him on a bough, instructing him in verse and song. He could almost feel her warm embrace, the gentle sway of a tree in the breeze. Then, recollection bloomed. A simple rhyme she'd often recited, claiming it held the key to understanding the world. A painted scene, a world untold, imagined realms forever bold. Though woods arise and rivers wind, mere phantoms there for you to find. The words resonated, a spark igniting in the dim recesses of his mind. A painted scene, imagined realms. His eyes flashed open. He fixed Rhonda with a newfound certainty. "A map!" he exclaimed, triumph surging. Rhonda Riddle's expression remained an enigma, unreadable. Silence stretched, punctuated only by the sigh of the wind whispering through the leaves. Squeaky held his breath, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Had he finally deciphered it? At last, Rhonda exhaled, a puff that stirred the fur at her jowls. "Correct," she conceded, a trace of disappointment coloring her tone. "A map it is." An irrepressible grin spread across Squeaky's face, relief washing over him in a warm tide. He had prevailed. Rhonda stepped aside, indicating the path winding deeper into the woods with a flick of her claw. "The way is yours, little squirrel. But heed this warning. The Whispering Woods test not just intellect, but fortitude as well." Squeaky nodded, his gaze locked on the path. He understood the road ahead would be fraught with peril, yet he was no longer the timorous creature who had stumbled into the woods, crippled by doubt. He had confronted a challenge and emerged victorious, proving his own capabilities. "Thank you," he said to Rhonda, sincerity ringing in his voice. "Your words will stay with me." He turned and proceeded, his tiny paws patting soundlessly on the leaf-strewn earth. As he ventured further into the whispering woods, the trees seemed to loom, their branches interlacing like bony fingers. The air chilled, and shadows lengthened. Yet Squeaky pressed forward, his resolve fueled by his mother's rhyme and the shimmering promise of the sky seeds. The woods murmured around him, a sibilant chorus of rustling leaves and groaning limbs. But tonight, their voices seemed less menacing, more like a soft encouragement. He was underway, one step nearer to realizing his cherished vision. Nothing would deter him. He carried a mother's wisdom as his compass. The maze of mirrors. Squeaky plunged further into the whispering woods, Rhonda Riddle's booming cackle fading behind him. The atmosphere thickened, saturated with the aroma of moist soil tinged with an odd, metallic tang. The once spacious trees now jostled for room, their branches weaving a claustrophobic ceiling. Sunlight struggled to infiltrate, casting elongated, grotesque shadows that writhed with each tremor of the foliage. His journey was short-lived, ending abruptly as he froze, bushy tail a-quiver. Before him, the trail dissolved into what appeared to be an unyielding expanse of crystalline glass. More than just a wall, it was a labyrinth, a bewildering warren forged entirely of mirrors, throwing the forest back on itself in a disorienting infinity. Squeaky advanced warily, tiny claws clicking on the earthy floor. A hesitant paw extended, contacting the cool, slick surface of the nearest mirror. Authentic, a miniature, anxious replica stared back, duplicated endlessly into the distance, each reflection mirroring his slightest gesture. He ventured a step inside. Instantaneously, vertigo assailed him. Left, right, ahead. Every direction presented the same perplexing vista. Timber, shades, and a myriad of his own likeness. He whirled, attempting to orient himself, but in vain. The mirrors deceived his perception, fabricating phantom pathways and concealing legitimate ones. A subtle vibration, almost imperceptible, thrummed in the air, amplifying the unsettling ambience. Panic threatened to overwhelm him. "Stay calm," he mentally commanded. Rhonda's riddle had underscored the significance of lucidity. He briefly closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and centered himself. Reopening them, he fought the urge to bolt. Instead, he remained motionless, observing. The reflections seemed flawless, bordering on unnatural. Yet perhaps therein lay the key. He scrutinized the mirrored images with meticulous care, seeking any minute deviation, any subtle anomaly that would reveal the deception. Then he noticed something. In one reflection, a fallen leaf lay slightly askew, its scarlet edge gleaming in the meager light. In another, the lichen pattern on a tree trunk appeared subtly altered. And then he spotted it, a delicate scratch, barely visible, gracing the surface of a single mirror, an imperfection absent from the actual world. Squeaky's heart leaped. He had found a discrepancy, a pointer. He approached the flawed mirror, his gaze sweeping the surrounding reflections. Certain images possessed greater clarity, betraying nuanced shifts in illumination that were not immediately apparent. He touched the mirror once more, tracing the scratch with a claw. Undeniably there, a minute chink in the otherwise impeccable illusion. A theory began to form. The mirrors that offered the truest representation of reality were the ones to avoid. The slightly warped reflections, those harboring subtle imperfections, likely indicated the genuine route. A gamble, yes, but he had naught to forfeit. Selecting a direction based on his deductions, he began to move, his pace deliberate and measured. He concentrated on the nuanced variations within the reflections, using them as his beacon. He registered a slight drop in temperature near particular mirrors, and the scent of damp earth proved more pronounced in certain locales. He trusted his instincts, relying on intuition as much as sight. He traversed the maze with exacting precision, his progress incremental but persistent. Several impasses confronted him, each a vexing reminder of the deceptive nature of the mirrors. However, with each setback, he gained insights, refining his approach and honing his senses. The strain was immense. Each step tested his resolve, challenging his capability to distinguish truth from falsehood. The silence within the maze existed only interrupted by the gentle susurrus of leaves and the faint, nearly inaudible hum emanating from the mirrors. After what seemed an epoch, Squeaky perceived an anomaly. A flicker of motion, a splotch of color at odds with the surrounding reflections. He advanced towards it, his heart drumming with anticipation. And then he espied it, the maze's perimeter, a break in the mirrored wall, beckoning towards the deeper, darker reaches of the Whispering Woods. He had prevailed. He had navigated the maze of mirrors. Following the ladybug, a sigh feathered from Squeaky's muzzle, briefly clouding the chilly glass before him. He'd been trapped in this disorienting dance of indecision for what felt like an age. Each mirrored surface presented a distorted parody, an endless legion of Squeakies mocking his plight. Despair, a frigid serpent, threatened to coil around him. Then, a spark of vermilion. Near the base of a looking-glass, a tiny ladybug, its ebony spots like polished beads, traversed the terrain. It possessed a purpose, a resolute direction in its minuscule existence. Squeaky, for a breath, became still, mesmerized by the creature's unwavering focus. A notion, frail as gossamer thread, began to weave itself into his thoughts. Could it truly be? Could this minuscule traveler be his guide? Granny Nutkin's yarns of woodland beings gifted with an intrinsic sense of direction, an attunement to the forest often lost to humans, or even squirrels, echoed in his mind. Ladybugs, she declared, always knew the proper course. Squeaky had scoffed at such whimsy, but desperation now rendered him willing to grasp at any hope, however small. He lowered himself, his nose almost brushing the cool earth, and commenced his pursuit. The ladybug edged forward with measured steps along the mirror's foundation. Squeaky mirrored its cadence, his whiskers quivering, his gaze riveted to its ruby form. It skirted the glass edge, then slanted left, traversing a patch of glistening moss. Squeaky followed, planting his paws meticulously where the ladybug had ventured. He disregarded the jeering reflections, the chaotic swirl of the labyrinth. He anchored himself to the tiny, scarlet compass leading the way. The air thickened with the musk of damp soil and decaying leaves. The maze's prior unnerving silence now offered a peculiar solace, a concentrated stillness that aided his focus on the ladybug's advance. The ladybug vanished beneath a fallen sprig, its shell momentarily obscured. Squeaky stilled, a flicker of panic igniting in his breast. What if it was lost? What if it took flight? Then it reappeared on the other side, continuing its unswerving trek. Relief bloomed within Squeaky, a warming wave against the chill of trepidation. He detected a subtle transformation in the atmosphere, a whisper of a breeze previously absent. The light seemed to brighten, less diffuse, less artificial. Sensing this change, the ladybug hastened its crawl. Squeaky hustled to maintain pace, his claws scrabbling on the moist ground. He registered the faint chorus of birdsong, a tune that had been muted within the maze's core. Hope ascended, a potent current demolishing his lingering misgivings. The ladybug neared the mirror's perimeter, pausing momentarily, as if weighing its next move. It ascended onto the frame, and then, with a delicate unfurling of its wings, soared into the sky. Squeaky observed its departure, a thread of melancholy intertwined with triumph. He had been shown the way, guided from the labyrinth by the most improbable of saviors. He peered ahead. The mirrors abruptly ended, yielding to the lush undergrowth of the Whispering Woods. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, speckling the forest floor in mosaics of light. He could inhale the pungent aroma of pine needles and humid earth, the harbinger of open space and liberation. He took a hesitant stride, then another. The ground felt firm beneath his paws, the air revitalizing in his lungs. He had emerged from the maze of mirrors. He paused at the wood's edge, casting a final glance at the maze. The mirrors stood mute, reflecting the sunlight in a dazzling array. They no longer wielded any influence over him. He had confronted his anxieties, embraced the uncertain, and surfaced triumphant. With a flick of his tail, Squeaky pivoted and vanished into the emerald embrace of the whispering woods, his spirit imbued with a renewed self-assurance. The sky seeds and the fantasy of flight felt closer than ever before. Barnaby's hide-and-seek. The air grew thick with the scent of pollen and damp earth as Squeaky finally emerged from the suffocating maze. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled branches intertwined, creating a cathedral of leaves that filtered the sunlight into dappled emerald patterns on the forest floor. He could hear the faint, almost musical buzzing growing louder with each hop he took. This had to be it, the Sky Seed Grove. Rounding a colossal oak, he gasped. It was even more magnificent than Granny Nutkin's stories described. Towering sunflowers, their faces tilted towards the heavens, formed a natural enclosure. At their bases, nestled amongst velvety moss and dew-kissed ferns, were the sky seeds. They pulsed with a gentle, inner light, their delicate wings shimmering like captured rainbows. Well, what have we here? Squeaky jumped, nearly losing his footing on a stray root. Perched atop one of the sunflowers, arms crossed, and a decidedly grumpy expression on his fuzzy face, sat a bumblebee. But this wasn't just any bumblebee. This one was enormous, easily the size of Squeaky's head, with stripes of ochre and black and wings that hummed with barely contained energy. I'm Squeaky, he stammered, trying to appear braver than he felt. I've come for the sky seeds. The bumblebee chuckled, a dry, buzzing sound. The sky seeds? And what makes you think you're worthy of such treasures, little squirrel? He puffed out his chest, which made his stinger even more prominent. I've traveled far, Squeaky said, puffing out his own considerably smaller chest. I've faced dangers, solved riddles, and even escaped a mirror maze. Barnaby Bumble, for that was his name, according to a crudely carved sign on the sunflower stem, raised a skeptical eyebrow. A mirror maze, you say? Impressive for a squirrel. But guarding the sky seeds is my solemn duty. I can't just hand them over to any furry face that wanders in. Squeaky's heart sank. He had come so far, overcome so much. Was his journey to end here, denied by a grumpy gatekeeper? Barnaby hopped down from the sunflower, landing with a soft thud. He circled Squeaky, his antennae twitching. Tell you what, little squirrel, I'm feeling bored. Terribly, terribly bored. And I haven't had a decent game in ages. So here's the deal. He stopped his circling and fixed Squeaky with a surprisingly intense stare. I'll play a game with you. If you win, you get one sky seed. Just one. If I win, well, you go back to wherever you came from, empty-pawed. Squeaky swallowed hard. It was a risk, but he hadn't come this far to give up. What kind of game? Barnaby grinned, a flash of yellow teeth. Hide and seek. But not just any hide and seek. Bumble hide and seek. I'll hide, and you have until the sun touches the top of that oak yonder to find me. He pointed with a hairy leg towards a particularly tall tree on the edge of the grove. If you can find me before then, the sky seed is yours. And don't think you could just climb on my sunflower. That's cheating. Squeaky scanned the grove. It was dense, filled with potential hiding places. The shadows danced and shifted in the breeze, making it difficult to discern shapes. And what if I can't find you? Barnaby shrugged. Then you admit defeat and leave. Simple as that. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But I'll give you a hint. I like fragrant things. Before Squeaky could ask for clarification, Barnaby spread his wings and launched into the air with a loud, triumphant buzz. He circled the grove once, twice, then disappeared into the dense foliage. Squeaky watched him go, his heart pounding. Hide and seek? With a bumblebee? This was going to be harder than the mirror maze. The sun was already starting its slow descent. He didn't have much time. He took a deep breath, tried to remember everything Granny Nutkin had ever taught him about the woods. Focus, she'd always said. Observe and listen. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to filter out the sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the chirping crickets, and focus on the subtle scents. He could smell the rich earth, the sweet pollen, the damp moss, and something else. Something faintly floral, almost lavender. He opened his eyes and scanned the grove again, this time paying attention to the flowers. There weren't any lavender bushes, but near the base of a giant fern, he spotted a patch of vibrant purple wildflowers he hadn't noticed before. They were small, delicate, and emitting a subtle, sweet fragrance. Could it be that simple? Was Barnaby hiding near the flowers? It seemed too obvious. But then again, maybe Barnaby wanted it to seem too obvious. Maybe it was a trick. He crept towards the wildflowers, his senses on high alert. He listened for the telltale buzz of Barnaby's wings, watched for any movement in the undergrowth. As he got closer, the scent of lavender grew stronger. He peeked behind the fern. Nothing. He felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. Had he been wrong? Was Barnaby playing a more cunning game than he'd anticipated? He was about to give up on the wildflowers when he noticed something glinting in the dappled sunlight. A tiny scrap of ochre and black fur, snagged on a thorn bush behind the wildflowers. Squeaky's eyes widened. Barnaby had been here. Recently. But where had he gone? He followed the line of the thorn bush, his gaze sweeping across the grove. And then he saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the leaves of a nearby honeysuckle vine, heavy with fragrant blossoms. The honeysuckle. That was it. Barnaby was hiding in the honeysuckle. Squeaky grinned, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He had found him. Now, all he had to do. Soaring high. Squeaky's nose twitched. The honeysuckle's sweet perfume was almost overwhelming, a sugary blanket in the afternoon air. He crept closer, the buzzing intensifying. He could hear Barnaby humming a tuneless drone, a sound that vibrated through the very leaves. "I know you're in there, Barnaby," Squeaky called out, his voice barely a squeak against the bee's drone. I followed the honeysuckle scent. The buzzing stopped abruptly. A moment of stunned silence hung in the air, thick and heavy as honey. Then, a disgruntled rumble. "Oomph! You cheated." A large, fuzzy form lumbered out of the honeysuckle, its stinger twitching with annoyance. Barnaby Bumble was even bigger up close, easily twice Squeaky's size. Honeysuckle was too obvious, Barnaby grumbled, his voice a low buzz. "I should have picked the foxgloves." Squeaky puffed out his chest, trying to appear braver than he felt. "A deal's a deal, Barnaby. I found you fair and square." Barnaby sighed, a gust of air that ruffled Squeaky's fur. All right. You win. Don't get your tail in a twist." He reached behind him, pulling out a small, burlap sack tied with a silken thread. "Here are your sky seeds. Plant them with care. They're not toys." Squeaky took the sack reverently. The seeds inside felt warm and pulsed with a faint, inner light. Rhonda Riddle's cackle felt like a distant echo now, fading with each step he took away from the maze. He glanced back at Barnaby, who was already disappearing back into the honeysuckle. He scampered to a small, open patch of earth bathed in sunlight. The soil here was dark and rich, and a gentle breeze whispered through the surrounding trees. He carefully untied the sack and poured the seeds into his paw. They were tiny, teardrop-shaped, and shimmered with all the colors of the sky at dawn. Remembering Professor Hoot's acorn and how it sprouted, Squeaky dug a small hole with his claws and placed the seeds inside, covering them with soil. He patted the earth gently, then sat back to wait. Nothing happened. Squeaky fidgeted, his tail twitching nervously. He remembered Granny Nutkin's stories about patience, about the slow, steady rhythm of the forest. He took a deep breath and focused, sending all his hope and energy into the ground. Then a tiny sprout emerged, pale green and delicate. It grew quickly, unfurling leaves that shimmered like emeralds. Within moments, 2 magnificent wings sprouted from Squeaky's back. They were iridescent, catching the sunlight and scattering rainbows across the forest floor. He gasped, touching them tentatively. They felt real, strong, and impossibly light. Taking a tentative step, he flapped his new wings. They caught the air, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. He soared. The feeling was unlike anything he had ever imagined. He swooped and dived, the wind rushing through his fur. The forest floor shrunk beneath him, the trees becoming a sea of green. He could see the whispering woods stretching out before him, a vast and beautiful landscape. He looped around Barnaby's honeysuckle patch, giving a cheerful wave to the grumpy bumblebee, who peeked out with a surprised buzz. Higher and higher he flew, above the tallest trees, closer to the sun than he'd ever dreamed possible. The fear that had gripped him during his failed flight attempt was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated joy. He saw the maze he'd conquered, looking like a tiny puzzle from above. He recalled the riddles, the challenges, the fears he had faced. All of them had led him to this moment, this feeling of boundless freedom. But even soaring through the sky, the teachings of his family echoed in his mind. He remembered his father's words about responsibility, about not letting success go to his head. He knew that true strength wasn't just about flying high, but about knowing when to come back down to earth. Slowly, gracefully, he descended, landing softly back on the patch of earth where the sky's seeds had sprouted. The wings remained, shimmering and beautiful, but he felt a new sense of groundedness. He wasn't just a squirrel who could fly. He was Squeaky, the squirrel who had faced his fears, solved the riddles, outsmarted a grumpy bumblebee, and learned the true meaning of flight. He looked at his wings, a tangible reminder of his journey. He flexed them experimentally, then folded them neatly against his back. He knew he would fly again, but for now, he was content to stand on solid ground, feeling the earth beneath his paws and the wind in his fur. The sky seeds had given him more than just wings. They had given him confidence, resilience, and a deeper understanding of himself. He turned to leave, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, his heart lighter than it had ever been. He knew his journey wasn't over, but now he knew he could handle anything the whispering woods threw his way.